Hello, everyone, and welcome. Yes, my name is Arrowfire, and welcome back to another episode of All Talk No Shot, where I am joined by the very famous Sixo. Sixo, thank you very much for coming along. Thank you
My
for
my
spending the time.
pleasure. I'm pleased to be here. So I don't know about very famous, but otherwise, yeah, very
You're
glad to be
being
here.
you're being too modest, sir. You are very well known in the Transformer community for some time, and with good reason, which we will touch on at the end of the video. No shock. But what I want to talk about today, along with Sixo's expertise, is around photography of Transformers and how it really is as common nowadays for Transformer fans as much as anything else. And that leads me on to the first question. So, Sixo, my first question really around this, I want to get your take on it. Is photography of Transformers in our collections as much a part of the collection as collecting itself, as much as getting the figure and having it saying,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
nice for me to look at, but is taking a photo of it just as big a part nowadays?
Nowadays, yeah, I think it absolutely is. I don't think it used to be that way for a lot of people, and it used to be that there were like a select group of people, well known names in the fandom or whatever that did the photos, and that's why you see so many like Generation One toys. The photos of them that are prevalent are like people like Cybertron and things like that. That they were sort of the known, photographers or whatever. And I think as camera phones have become more prevalent, that things like that and a younger audience, I think actually the two now really go hand in hand, and that there are so many people doing what I perceive to be exceptional toy photography out there now, often with even very basic kit or whatever it might be. So I think it's sort of become more intertwined, that experience of getting a new toy, a new Transformer, whatever it is, and the photography aspect than ever before. And for my own money, certainly it's a totally intrinsic part of the enjoyment of this hobby. I couldn't imagine amassing so many toys or whatever without that part of it, because very often, even looking at a new reveal of a toy or whatever, my mind is immediately going to the sort of photography aspect of it, and how I might be able to shoot it or what I might be able to do with it. So yeah, I think more than ever before, it's a big part of it actually.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think you're getting it now is it's as much the elation of getting a new figure. It's
Yeah,
opening up and you're like, wow, this is great. And you think back to when we were kids with Generation One, we're fiddling with the toys, the playability, the wow factor was there. That's what you wanted to do instantly. But now, as adult collectors, you do still want to do that. You do still want to play with the figure, pose with
yeah,
the
yeah.
figure. But you as much want to recreate settings. So we see a lot of that as soon as a figure is released. You will reenact a scene from the '86 movie or what have you,
Yeah.
to get that kind of, oh, look what I can do now with this figure. And I think it shows a sense of, when, particularly when people just get a new figure, they want to take a photograph of it it's so early. It's that elation. It's wow, I must get my hands on this to do this photo, do what I want to do
I,
with it.
I think so. Yeah, I've had a few people, or I've noticed a few people online before, want to be like the first person to recreate a particular scene with a particular toy, that kind of thing. And I've probably been in that world before as well. I don't worry about those sorts of things now. But I think even the fact that you see Hasbro doing it, with their photography, and I mean, there's the old joke about Hasbro stock photography and things, but actually I've got to tell you, I think it's exceptional these days. Like, I think it's really, really amazing what they do. And the photographer that does a lot of their stuff is known online as well. He's really good. But the point is that they've clearly tapped into that aspect as well, of like recreating scenes, really kind of going for the nostalgia aspect of it. So yeah, of course, I think that's more than ever before. That's a huge part for sure.
Well, you've clearly looked at my questions because you kind of led on to another one there. So,
All right.
so
Okay. Sorry.
no, no, no. I think it's a good segue as I could do. So I think that's kind of what I want to say. Well, actually, I've got 2 points. So I'll touch on this one because as you mentioned it, Transformer fans start taking photos, and now we're even seeing just general everyday fans, people who've been collecting, let's say 10 years to put a number on it, and then you're now seeing these fans with almost basic camera phones, but have probably upgraded their equipment since.
Mhm.
Some of them even get taken on to do product shots or have their photos used as product shots. So
Yeah.
is that not a rite of passage? That's probably not the right term, but it's a very nice succession, isn't it? Where you're just a fan taking a photo of something that you got real enjoyment of, but your craft is so good, your end product is so good that even Hasbro or a third-party company will go, do you know what? We actually think we could use that within our own organization.
I think so. I think there is something about fan photography that is appealing because there's clearly a sort of inherent passion with that. The people that really enjoy these products are putting that across in the way that they do their photography or whatever. And I think that appeals to other fans as well. So it makes sense that people might be picked up in that in the manner that you're speaking about or what have you. And clearly the people behind the brand, Hasbro, are big fans as well. And I think we're in this era where even the people working on it grew up with the brand as well. That's the designers, the marketeers, the photographers, all of them. So it makes sense that passion kind of comes through, I think. But yeah, certainly I think it's terrific that people are able to kind of get into it, as you said, maybe just with a camera phone or whatever at the start, but then really kind of hone their craft as they go. And I don't think that toy photography, I don't think is a difficult thing to get going with. And I think what's rewarding about it is that it's you can make quick improvements as you go as well. You can really kind of get the learnings and kind of improve and things like that. So yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, in my very modest Instagram page, I don't regard myself as a toy photographer, but I do enjoy it. And I've taken a few photos and I look back and I hear other people, particularly on Twitter, saying the same thing, saying, look at how my photos have changed from a year. And you do see, like any new craft, you see this massive spike of skill improvement. And it's like anything when you practice, you do improve, particularly in the beginning, in leaps and bounds. And even I've noticed some of the ones that I tweak and put into different situations, different poses, different lightings, different what have you. And you're like, oh wow, that's made a substantial leap. And as you say, it's just the things that you pick up on the way, and there's certain the techniques that you learn from other photographers.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it as well. And we're all of us learning as we go. We're all of us continuously improving. I mean, I look back. I started doing toy photography in I think it was about 2014, give or take. Wasn't that long ago, although 10 years somehow. I don't know how that's frightening to kind of, yeah, exactly. That's kind of frightening to a bit. It always felt like, oh, it wasn't that long ago. And then suddenly it's 10 years. It's funny. Ouch. But, when I say that I was, started with toy photography, I think that was literally the first time I took a photo of a Transformers toy. Although I think it was third party, but never mind. I think it was Feral Rex, their Predaking, the MMC Feral Rex. But it was just a camera phone thing, same as anybody else. And then I think pretty quickly I was like, well, what if I got my DSLR on the go, which, I already had, because I already did do photography, landscapes and things before that. And it just kind of went from there. But I look back at old photos that I took now and I do cringe a little bit because you're constantly learning. And as you said, constantly picking up new tricks, even just simple little things. And, even I would say this week I've learned something, that like looking into new techniques, new little ways of doing things, a new little tool or something that will make a particular aspect of it a little bit easier in some way or better. This week I was looking at like reflections of light and things like this. So that was something that I was kind of reading about. So it all goes into the photos that you take. And so, yeah, I think that kind of continuous improvement is a big part of it.
Absolutely. I mean, to go slightly off photography for a second, but to the point that you just made, I even look back, and I don't know why I do it, but I look back at my my first YouTube video that I put up three and a half years ago. My God, it's awful. Oh, it's terrible. But it shows you, like with anything, the dirty word of practice, as I've always said. I play guitar as well, and it's God knows when you start off, absolutely nothing, but it's the things you pick up on the way, and that expands into photography as much as anything else.
Yeah, 100%. I also play the guitar, but I'm sure you're better than me. because I don't do enough
very
practice
kind.
on that. So no, I've no doubt. But yeah, but no, YouTube and all of that, it's all the same principle, really. It's just the more you put in, the more you get out. And I think
Absolutely.
that I do speak to some people sometimes who want to try toy photography or something like that, and they're maybe a little bit intimidated by the prospect of it because they're like, oh well, I look at what other people do and it looks really good, and I've tried to do it and it looks a bit crap, and I always say to people, yeah, but so does everybody's output when they start. It always looks a bit crap. That's the point. You have to kind of keep going, and keep persevering and learn from that and think about what didn't work and what mistakes you made, and keep that improving. I think that's a massive part of it. And
I'm very glad you said that, actually, because
yeah,
I've done that very much from your photos, and I don't say that in no kind of a malice whatsoever. But
no.
I look at your photo and I think, how does he do that? And actually, I'm going to have a little bit of fun here. I
Go
blame
for it.
you because you made me pick up, and I'll grab it because it's here. You made me pick up this figure with your photography. How dare you?
Oh, nice. Yeah,
The dark amber masterpiece MP
it's
48
lovely though.
plus. It is, but I, despite being a massive Beast Wars fan, I'm not
Yeah,
particularly this era of Beast Wars. Is my cup of tea. I'm much more of the cartoon. But it was your photo of this,
thank you.
and it just wow, I've got to buy this. So how dare you, sir? How dare you? But
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 that was a good example, actually, because even on that shoot, I remembered that one because I was using rear lights to kind of cast a light backwards and everything, and even that was kind of a learning process. And black toys actually are very hard to shoot as well because they it's hard to get the detail, but also they really pick up the dust like really heavily. When
very
it's
true.
yeah, it's I like shooting black toys, but I also dread it because I just know that there's always going to be like constantly out there with a little makeup brush trying to get rid of the dust and things like this. And yeah, so
Yeah.
that was a memorable photo shoot, that one.
Well, for my one, when I looked at it, when I got it, and I was just like, wow, and it's a good figure. Don't get me wrong. I'm not unhappy with my purchase that
Good,
I've
good.
been coerced into, shall we
Yeah,
say?
right.
But when I took a photo of it, I was so impressed with your photo, particularly with like the reflective lines of the orange and the blue that were on the
Thank you.
bottom, and I just thought, wow, I've got to do that because I thought that popped so well, and how you get a dark figure to pop
Yeah,
is I think is quite a technique. But of course, my challenge, as you mentioned there, around black figures and dark figures, I use the white light box. I don't tend to
white
go
background. Yeah,
for dioramas as such or backlighting. So my issue is predominantly with white figures, and
yeah,
they just completely sunk in. So I've got a Nova Prime in an MP scale with an upgrade kit. So it's a bit of an MP one. And I took a photo of that, was really pleased with it. And when I had that with the white background, all you could really see was his black antenna and black face.
yeah.
And I thought, oh, what am I going to do now?
That is a difficult one. I mean, to be honest, that's why I don't typically do a lot of like solid color. I have done it before of like solid backgrounds and things, but that's often why I think that it's nice to have a bit of contrast between the background and the figure. Sometimes it can work. I did some pictures of Transmetal 2 Legacy Megatron, the dragon, and I had
Mhm.
that on a kind of red fiery background, and that was by intent, to kind of have to sort of meld it almost with the background a little bit. But I think it's the old color theory, isn't it, of like blues and yellows and things like that, kind of contrasting or whatever it is. I always have to look it up to remind myself. Greens and purples is a good example.
Okay.
To try and have that contrasting background, I think works quite well. And certainly, yeah, when you've got a black toy or a white toy, it's quite difficult if there's not much color in the background. Definitely.
Yeah, and it's something that I was happy with the photo I took with him, but yeah, if I've taken with my white light box, a
Mm,
Ratchet, Nova Prime, to think of a few, or even a Metroplex, it's just like, oh, this is, I want to take a photo of it,
yeah,
but at the same time, it's just going to disappear, and
yeah,
but these are the things that you learn along the way, such as you say.
exactly.
So one point that I've actually raised before, but I'd be interested to get your take on it. And I'm going to focus on third-party companies. I'm actually going to pick on fans toys because I do a lot. But
Sure.
as much as I'm a big fan of fans toys, you do see, and I actually picked up one of the boxes. I picked up the Iceman Goose, not Goose,
Oh yeah,
Iceman
yeah,
Air
yeah.
Raid.
The
And
Aerobots. Yeah.
the product shots on the back of it, I felt looked a little bit basic, just a bit boring, particularly when it was a plane. Now, I kind of said at the time, it's a jet in the sky, it's got a blue background. Okay, there you go. But some of their other ones I found that they go for these, you see the fan stories product shots, there's like rubble, they're broken up pieces of pavement, and they're standing on them in poses. And I felt that to sell a figure, particularly as a third party where you need as much publication and free press as possible, that photography of that figure is as much of a selling point as anything else. So what's your take on it from a third party perspective? Do you think that third party companies particularly put more or any more or less impetus on their photography to sell their products than, say, Hasbro do?
It's an interesting question. I guess it depends on the company. Some of them are really good at it. And, there are some like MMC who, again, use people in the community. I mean, very, I think it's a known relationship that like Ocular Max MMC, they use, Hard Return, Ian Reed, that is very well known, for example, and he does amazing photography. So I think that in that regard, yeah, you really see the benefit of that. There are some that I'm trying to think of examples now, like Trends Art do quite nice photography. I don't know who does their stuff, but they've got I think I've got some of the same kit actually, the sort of base backgrounds and things, and that always looks really nice. Fans Toys, again, I don't know who does their photography. I'm not aware. But I do know what you mean. Sometimes they're a little bit static or whatever. But I think it depends. I think, again, Hasbro, coming to them, have really upped their game massively. And it's the same photographer now that does the Transformers stuff like Legacy and things like that, that also does Marvel and does G.I. Joe and that kind of stuff. And honestly, for me, that's gold standard. Like, it's, some of the new, I don't collect G.I. Joe, but some of the new product photography for them especially. And like, I don't know if you saw the Giant Man HasLab.
That looked pretty good.
The photography on that, for me, that's not something I collect at all. But even I was looking at it going, man, that thing looks incredible. And that was purely the toy photography that brought me into it,
Absolutely. I've said this before. You can get a photographer that can take a bang average figure, make it look good, and there you go. Boom, you got a sale straight away.
Absolutely. And I think Hasbro know that now, like more than ever. They're aware of that.
Well, we saw Sandstorm, didn't we, just yesterday, day before, and it was, I wouldn't say that absolutely wowed me, but then when I looked at like the shots with the lava volcanic background to it, I just thought, oh no, that's actually pretty smart.
I was dead impressed with that, and that's part of the fun of it, though, as well. Is sort of it's nice to see photography that you can really admire. And I had the same thing with a lot of the Kingdom photography they did, with the lava and things, where they had like Kingdom, Beast Wars Megatron and things like that. And the arc photography I thought was superb. And it's nice to see that and look at it as someone that also does toy photography and think, wow, I am slightly in awe of that, and I'm already like looking at ways to recreate that lava effect and things like that, because it's just so good.
No,
but it's also credit to the photographer. It's one thing to try and imitate it, but it's another to come up with it in the first place, I think, and to kind of think, okay, I want something that looks like this. How am I going to do it? And that, I think, is really it's to be credited.
I think that cycling back to my first point, I think that's a lovely evolution of collecting that we are doing, that you've got these very talented minds that want to who clearly have a creative spark to them, such as yourself, who want to say, I want to do this and I want to recreate that, but I want to put my own spin on it. And what if, is anyone doing this? And it just opens up a world of opportunity that really all started from collecting plastic toys in the mid to late 80s. And then
it's so true. And I do think that there's a lot of looking at what other people do and thinking about how they've done it. I mean, I spend a fair bit of time talking to other people that do toy photography, people like, obviously, Liam Toybox Soapbox, who I do the podcast with, is equally into his toy photography as well. We share a lot of ideas and things. But also there's a way of there's a way of learning from other people without trying to copy them, and I think that is also important. You know what I mean? That you have your own spin on things and your own kind of identity. I think that I think it's best done when you look at something and you think, wow, that's amazing. Like, I would love to do something like that. How am I going to do it? You know, how am I going to make it me and unique? And I think that's important. I've definitely taken shots before where then I've seen someone else do something that they've done before me, and I'm like, wow, that's really similar actually to what they've done, you know. And I always feel a little bit whoops, you know, but of course that
Yeah,
happens, but
it
it's
does. Yeah.
inevitable. But
I
you
get
know,
entirely what you mean, because when I've taken some photos, it's like I want to do that, but I don't want to tread on anyone's toes. I certainly don't want to copy
sure,
any styles. But there is a sense of inevitability about it, because you're taking the same photograph, a photograph of the same figure,
yeah,
and you're trying to do a style that will be very similar to what someone else wants to do. You're inevitably going to do the same thing. So one example that I've had,
yeah.
it was Plastic Crack who did it was
Oh,
like
he's really good.
it was like a handstand pose of MMC's Octus Pexus, and I've
Right.
been trying to get that figure in a one-handed handstand for a long time, and I was texting him saying, I want to do it, but I'm conscious if I, he just
Yeah.
did the photo. If I put it up like next week, it's like, all right, cooling off
I,
period. But
I think yeah, it, as I say, it happens definitely. And I think especially now that it's what you said earlier, it's almost recreating scenes and things like this. So, you know, even with backgrounds and things like that, you know, even away from like white backgrounds, it's sort of inevitable that, like, if you're shooting a Beast Wars toy, for example, you're going to want to put it in like a jungle or something. So
yeah,
it starts to become a little bit more common, you know, like where people place these particular toys. Or like an 86 movie toy is probably going to have like an orange sort of base background or something,
yeah,
you know. The sort of
there's only so
commonalities that,
much.
right, exactly. So, and once you know, if you've got like an arc background or something, and it's the same toy as someone else who also has an arc background, there's going to be a natural similarity there. But I think there's also a quality to the photography and a kind of style in the way that things are shot that also shines through. So even
Mm.
if it is a similar pose, same toy, similar background, you can still see the difference. And I think that's quite nice.
Sure, absolutely. So quickly, I want to just touch on, because you mentioned it there, and so another very good segue
Yeah.
is around not so, well, it is something that you do, but certainly something we see a lot more of. It's around dioramas and
Mhm.
setting of the photo. Now, I'm happy to admit my Luddite state, if you like, I don't have the patience for it. I did try with some astroturf and some trees, and I've got some
Sure.
rocks that have the rocks I found have made a difference when I use them, but I don't always have the patience for it. And then when I see some of these tremendous dioramas and backgrounds being created, that adds so much to the presentation of the figure. Uh, Almost want to say it subtracts from the figure itself, because the background can be so pretty, but then it's the background that's making the figure look good as well. So
Yeah.
where do you stand on sort of settings and dioramas?
I mean, I love it personally. I'm really into it. And I find that is something that I enjoy as much as sort of the individual toy. Like, I do try and think typically about what the backdrop is going to be that's going to match the toy well. I'm not too worried about scene recreations these days. Like, I have done that, and that is something that I see people do, and I always enjoy that. Like, I always enjoy, like, just what we were saying before, you know, like 86 movie shots, you know, getting the very specific background that recreates the exact frame of the cartoon or the movie in such a way. You know, I have seen people go to great lengths to try and replicate that. I'm less worried about that personally. Like, something that just kind of evokes the right feeling but isn't an exact match is fine for me. But yeah, dioramas and things, I really enjoy it. It's a time sink though, definitely, and it could get, you know, there's a lot of disadvantages to it. It's expensive, like to pick up lots of varied bits and to keep it fresh. That's another disadvantage, is that if you use the same diorama over and over and over and over and over again, it can look, I think, like a little bit, certainly that's a critique I have of my own stuff, is that it maybe gets a bit repetitive. You know, it's a lot to keep as well. Again, Liam and I joke about this all the time of like, well, where am I going to put this? Do you know what I mean? This, like, just backdrops and things. Oh, sorry, backdrops and things. Wherever it all sort of sits and stores and things, it takes up a lot of space, and and it's time consuming to find all the stuff as well. So, I mean, I get people sometimes message me like, "Oh, where did you get that diorama?" And I'm like, it's really hard to say because it's like, I don't know, it's rocks from my garden. It's like a bit of something that like was originally intended for a fish tank that I got from a pet store. It's like some fake trees, a bit of fake grass, a TV backdrop behind it, and it's all stuff that I've accumulated, like sometimes accessories from other toys or whatever it might be. Sometimes purposeful base bits or something that isn't intended for photography, but I've looked at it and thought that would look cool, just blurred out in the background or something. Sorry, my cat's just entered the room. You might hear her
that's
meowing.
quite all right. No, that's fine. Feline interaction.
Yeah, I should have shut her out because knowing that it's feeding time at 12 o'clock and it's now about an hour away, she's going to start pestering. So, but yeah, no. So it's quite a time consuming process, all of that. But yeah, I'm big into it. I find it a lot of fun. And that I find sort of part of the creative aspect of it all as well.
I think that's a really interesting point, and I'm glad you brought that up around kind of, well, two points there. One I'll just touch on because I bang on about this a lot. Space. It's not getting any smaller, put it that way.
Yeah,
and
it's
if
a big thing.
if you've got another thing like light boxes, I'm very lucky that my light box, you can't really see it, but it's a really quite large one. I can fit Masterpiece combiners in there, and it folds completely flat pack. Absolutely love that. That's brilliant. But I've got the camera on the stand and everything else. It's not to say this is a negative by any sense, but your collection is already large, and now what you use to enjoy your collection all the more is just as big 100%. A space.
It's a major thing, and like particularly in the UK where we don't have massive basements and things like this, like I'm often in awe of the space that you see in some American homes and things. And I've mentioned this before on our pod that there's one or two like collection tour videos I've seen where I'm just like, my God, do you know what I mean? That's like the whole top floor of my house. Wow. It's incredible what you see. Whereas I'm also someone that I don't like a lot of mess, and I don't like my collection to be spread out throughout the house. I'm just like, I don't want robots and toys in every single room. I like it to be sort of neat and have its place in the home.
Sure.
So absolutely keeping on top of a collection diorama stuff is it's difficult. I've got a lot of let's say inventive solutions for where stuff goes. Just to try and keep it all packed away, basically. So
yeah, and I think that's a really good point you mentioned around resourcing the stuff for the diorama. So, like as you say, rocks from a back garden, things like that can be invaluable to someone watching, thinking, I didn't think of that, because the rocks I've used, I think they were from like an aquarium store, for fish tanks intention. The trees I used were maybe even Hornby, train sets, those kind of settings. And you think about it, it's all very similar. I know people who have literally gone to the beach, taken a scoop of sand to go, there you go, there's my desert background.
I have a little tray of play sand just over here, which was my son's, and I just took a little bucket of it or whatever, and that's come in handy on occasion. But yeah, you're right. I think it's all creativity. It's all looking at stuff and thinking, well, that would be nice. We were at I think it was last year sometime, we were at a garden center, and they had these big slate rocks, basically just huge slate rocks. And I said to my wife, I'll be back in a minute, I'm just going to go and get 3 or 4 of these, and it's just silly things like that. I mean, you've got to be careful with that stuff as well, because it's easy to damage toys. If you're using like real rocks and things, it's easy to
true.
You've got to watch out for that. Whereas models, like you said, model train stuff, things like that is really good as well. I spend a lot of time like looking into the scale of stuff, and trying to work out, is that going to look right versus the robots, and some stuff scales well with like Masterpiece that doesn't scale well with, let's say, Legacy or G1 or whatever it is. So it's a whole thing by itself, I think.
It sounds interesting. It really does. Talking to you about it really opens up your mind. And as you say, it's just talking into the other photographers in the community, trading of the trade secrets, as it were, the
Yeah,
things that
yeah.
you pick up on the way can make such a difference. Okay, so a quick one for you. For aspiring photographers who are starting out in transformer photography, but not necessarily transformer photography in general, toy photography, shall we say, what in your experience has been some of the most valuable pieces of information that you've been told? What did you wish you knew sooner that perhaps you can impart on to somebody else that they can adapt into their own style of photography? What sort of techniques would you pass on?
Yeah, that's a really tricky question, actually, because I guess it's difficult to answer because I feel like you can't rush. You know, we were talking about kind of like evolving, your evolution, all of that. You can't rush that process either. So it's that's difficult, you know. And I think there are so many things that I've learned as I've gone just through the experience of doing it, but also that's been part of the fun of it as well. I guess really the best bit of advice I can give is don't be disheartened. You know, don't be turned off if you don't get the results that you want like immediately, because nobody does ever. Particularly not with toy photography, because it is a very fiddly process. You know, there's a lot that can go wrong. Actually, that's one thing I would say. If it gets frustrating at any point, walk away. You know, that's that's one thing that I kind of had to learn. You know, when you suddenly you're midway through doing something and you think, I'm not actually enjoying this because it's just not going the way that you want it to. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
I'm someone that I like to press on, and I like to kind of get things finished. And sometimes that's not the best approach, you know, because you don't get the results that you want in that moment.
definitely.
And maybe just to kind of come back to it with a fresh pair of eyes. Like I'm halfway through shooting a video now, and already there are things that I shot just at the end of yesterday that this morning I've looked at and I'm like, I can do that better. Do you know what I mean? Just silly things like that sometimes. I guess it's patience, but yeah,
Yeah.
that would maybe be one thing. I know that's a little bit hypothetical, maybe, but
No, I think you're absolutely right, because I've even had it in my limited photography that I do, and I've taken photos, and I've gone through to sort of like an editing process of doing a little bit of touching
sure.
up here and there. What I like to do is I like to put glowing effects on the eyes if I can. If I feel the eyes are a bit dead, and can just do a light on the corner to touch them up, and as I'm doing it, I'm like, do you know I'm not happy with this? You know, and
Yeah,
if it gets to the point that you post it, and what I've done is I've shared photos, I've done all the hashtags and everything else. It's all gone up and gone, take it down. I'm not happy with that
yeah,
as an end product, and that feels like a big step back. I can't say it doesn't, but it's if it's something that you're particularly proud of and you want it
yeah.
part of your portfolio, for lack of a term, uh, you want it to be right. You want to be proud of it as by the end of it as much as during it.
I think so, definitely. I mean, ultimately, you know, we're all doing this for an enjoyment factor of some kind, whatever that is. So if you're not happy with what you're doing or have done, then it's time to step away, you know. And yeah, certainly, I've had plenty of occasions where I've taken a picture of something, loaded it up to look at, and I'm like, oh, it's a bit rubbish, actually. Do you know what I mean? And I'm just not satisfied. And honestly, it's a pain to go and redo things, and sometimes it's not always possible, or you don't have the time for it, or whatever else. But I think, you know, if you're not satisfied, just yeah, I suppose that
Why are you
not
doing
being
it?
afraid. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've got to enjoy this process. You've got to be into it.
Yeah.
If you're not getting the enjoyment from it, it's not worth it.
No, I think you've hit the nail absolutely on the head there, and I think yeah, you've got to enjoy it. It's a fandom to be enjoyed. You spent the money to enjoy it. You know, you
Yeah.
shouldn't be getting frustrated with your craft. So I think you've imparted some very good knowledge and wisdom there.
Well, I don't know about wisdom, but I know I speak to a lot of people, a lot of collectors who are, you know, my age or significantly younger than me in some cases, but they all, not all, but a lot of people at some point have this feeling of, I don't want to call it burnout because that always sounds a bit dramatic, but you know, that feeling of like to just not enjoying the hobby maybe as much at that point as before, you know. And sometimes that's cyclical, you know, it comes in little waves. I know people
Definitely.
who come dip in and out, you know, and at some point they're loving it and other points they're not. And I think if you're at the point, and it's true of toy photography, where you are just getting annoyed with it and it's not giving you what you need, don't be afraid to step away. I think is the thing.
The burnout and fatigue is a real thing. I've
Yeah,
experienced it. I think you find if you get a collection like we were talking about at the start of the video, if you get a lot of releases, and this happens a lot, particularly in third-party worlds. Like at the moment, we're around Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year. You get kind of a drier spell of third-party releases, so there tends to be around January mass releases from companies. You get a lot of figures coming out. You think, right, I want to take photos of this, and then it's push, demand, and then you feel like I need to step away, and so
yeah, it gets
that
a bit
does
much.
happen. Yeah,
It gets a bit much.
That's also the life, almost a work-life balance in that sense. You have to try and find a time to say, can I do this at the moment? And I've experienced it myself, but it is to be enjoyed, as you quite rightly say.
Yeah, I think so. We all get like that. I mean, I guess tangentially to that, one thing that I see a lot of now is that people are, and I mentioned it first, like desperate to be the first to post pictures of something, desperate to be, to kind of get that edge. There's this almost feeling of like, oh, if I haven't got pictures posted of a new toy within the first week or whatever of its release, that it's, who wants to see that? And I know photographers that again have been doing this for years that have that feeling. And to be honest, I think the best thing that I ever did for myself was decide that I just don't care about that, and I know sometimes I post pictures of things months after, sometimes more after they've been released, and like everyone else is done with it. People have moved
Yeah.
on, and I just don't care in the way. I just think, well, as long as I'm enjoying it and I'm doing it for me, then it's okay. Do you know what I mean? And maybe it won't get the engagement that you want it to or whatever, because it's not on day one of release or whatever. But I think you've got to think about why you're doing it. That's the thing. And if it's just for social media engagement or whatever, maybe that's never going to give you ultimately long term the satisfaction that you want. I think.
No,
Does that
quite.
make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, you're absolutely. I mean, I've got to be, I've got to be truthful. I've fallen into that trap myself, very much so around some of my videos. You feel, maybe more so when you're starting out, you want to get attraction, and
Of
so
course.
you want to get the and there is a sense of elation to it. You want to talk about something, you want to take a photo of something, you want to review something, whatever that may be. You want to do that before anyone else does because it's a hot topic. And there is a
Yes.
degree of that. But as you quite rightly say, if you're purely focused on that for the engagement, the clicks, the likes, or whatever, it takes away the pureness. I don't know if that's the right term, but that wholesome enjoyment. But to put up a point of
Yeah.
that, excuse me, I review, and I don't mean to hijack your interview at all, but I did a review of Fans Toys Maverick, their Silver Bolt. Well, after that was released in 2019, and I think I put that up like a year and a bit ago, and
Yeah.
it actually went down quite well. But it was just
It's a
because I
yeah.
wanted to talk about it.
It's surprising, actually. Sometimes I think if you're not in the kind of normal cycle, if you're like online where like all the video reviews of something are dropping at one point or all the photographs are dropping at that one point, if you kind of extricate yourself from that, actually, I think there's almost something to be
It
said for
pays
it,
you back, pays you back.
Yeah, in a weird way, and I'm never, not for ages have I been someone that's like on the cutting edge. I mean, for example, just I forget when it was. It was the end of last year. I did a gallery of Legacy Blitzwing, and I even joked about it and said, "Oh, real finger on the pulse stuff here. Everybody's talking about this toy, but people seem to really enjoy the photos, and it got good traction and everything." So I don't know. I think again, it's just that you've got to find the love for it, in here for yourself. You've got to enjoy what you're doing because of the craft of it, the hobby of it, all of that, not for some arbitrary numbers on the internet type thing. That would be my learning, I suppose, that at whatever point it was, I went, okay, I'm changing how I do this kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's what enjoyment you've got to get out of it at the end. So as we touched on, sort of imparting wisdom to other photographers or photographers starting out, but let's have a talk of maybe the equipment that you use. You mentioned there around digital cameras and some of the background screens, which I've always found very fascinating. So if I'll actually go in quickly with that point, because I know a long time ago, actually, I actually messaged you and asked what you used as a backdrop, and you told me that you used a screen. And I try using a screen, and I've used light rings as well to kind of, because I always say, I feel I should have said this at the start of it, there's never enough light. There is,
it's true.
You could be on the surface of the sun, there's never enough light. But I would use lights on the figure, particularly a darker figure, to make it shine more, but then I get the effect reflecting back on the screen. So then I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. So quick run through then of your equipment and
sure.
kind of pros and cons of what you've used or parted with over time.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, yes, I do. So I do use a digital screen. I mean, it's just here actually, but it's an old TV just on a stand, sort of a bracket that slides up and down and can rotate and that. And it's nothing fancy. It's fairly large. I think it's maybe like a 50-inch screen or what have you. But it was the secondhand one that I picked up, some time ago, whenever it was, and from a mate of mine actually. And it's always done me proud because the ability to put whatever you want on there as a backdrop. I think the key thing with it is two things. Firstly, the light, which you've identified, of like positioning lights in a way that it's not reflecting on the screen, which I struggled with for ages. And secondly, about having it like a little bit blurred out, so that because it's the more in focus it is, with the subject of the shot that you're taking, the more obvious it is that it's a digital screen, is the thing. Whereas you can get some quite nice effects with it if it's a little bit blurred at the back. But I also do try and blend it. Like very few of my shots are 100% digital background. I always try and blend it with some foreground or background elements that are practical as well, because I think the mix of it is ultimately what makes it. I have done 100% digital as a background before, and then something as a kind of base or whatever that's practical. But I know some people that use green screen and things as well. It's never been an appeal to me. I just think the after editing, all of that, nah. Do you know what I mean? That's not my bag personally, and I think this works
That's
better.
Understandable.
Yeah, but you're right about the lights. So in terms of lighting, I have 3 soft boxes. I know a lot of people use like a fixed light box or something like that. I prefer mobile, like more mobile soft boxes, that are sort of those slightly sort of like rectangular shaped, things on stands with big LED lights in them. And then I have one up above, kind of mounted on a big arm, so it sits above, and 2 either side. And I find actually having those positioned from the sides in a way that they don't reflect on the screen is sort of a really good setup for me. That works really nicely. And I do have lots of little
notes as we speak.
Yeah, go for it. I have lots of little handheld little lights and things as well, and those have got colors on them. You can change the colors, and I have some other ones on little like articulated arms and things like that you can position. So for like little spotlights and things, that's really useful. So definitely I'm with you on the light thing. The more light the better ultimately.
Yeah.
The soft boxes are really useful because you can dim them as well. You can change the warmth of the light, go really cool or really warm, so that all of this makes a difference to the tone of what you're doing. And even changes things like colors, stuff like that in the shot as well, which is really quite interesting. So yeah, in terms of base setup, and then I have quite a sizable table, which is actually what's in front of me now, which I think I said to you before we sorry, it's my cat again.
No, I got the cat that time.
Yeah. She's definitely getting a little bit hungry, bless her. But yeah, I think I said to you before we started that I've got a main table that's actually on wheels, on casters. And it's a hard floor in here, so I can move stuff around quite freely. So between the soft boxes, the TV, the table, stuff's always moving for me to kind of get the right angle and things like that. So yeah, and in terms of a basic setup, that's what I do.
Okay, excellent. Good to know there. And that's some very, again, parted words of wisdom that people will, I'm sure, be making their own notes. I have done already.
Well, I will say is that, again, it's constantly evolving. And again, looking at even those Sandstorm pictures that you mentioned, the Hasbro ones, I would say even something like that, as I mentioned, I'm looking at going, okay, so what can I learn from this, And so I think my setup has evolved massively in the time I've been doing this, and I think anybody that does this long enough, of course it will. You're always reinventing things and finding new ways of doing it.
Okay, so we'll just finish up then with last question to you, Sixo, is what's new with you? What's you got coming up? What's going on with Triple Takeover? Any other projects that you can impart? And really, the floor is yours to talk about your platforms.
Thank you for asking. That's kind of you. Yeah. So if people have not heard Triple Takeover, do go and give us a listen. It's a fortnightly podcast with myself and Liam from Toybox Soapbox, who many people will know as well, and Jason, who's our third member, who maybe isn't as well known on like social media or what have you, but you can find him at JSwags.
That's
his lovely guy.
That's his new nickname that I'm hearing now.
Yeah,
JSwags.
Exactly. Yeah, he briefly mentioned it in passing, and it's really stuck just because it's hilarious. So, but yeah, he's a really good guy. So yeah, we do a fortnightly public podcast, and we have a private Patreon as well, and where we do weekly exclusive content, all kinds of stuff. So do go and check us out. We're at tripletakeover.com in case anybody wants to take a look. But yeah, we talk about Transformers and lots of other stuff as well. And we've just done an episode on Gladiators, the 1992 Gladiators and things like that. So that was great fun. Liam bringing out lots of old toys from the 80s and 90s and things like that. I'm actually, as I said, just halfway through doing a video right now. And to be honest, I've not focused on my YouTube much enough, I should say, for some time. So actually this year I fully plan to get back to doing that on a much more regular basis, and really going for it with a bit more with YouTube. So that's I'm looking forward to that. And funnily enough, I haven't mentioned this actually publicly, but I'm actually planning to do an ongoing YouTube series on toy photography, because I've threatened to do it so many times over the years, and I have been asked before. People are like, "Oh, you should really do more behind the scenes stuff," and so I've been planning it out and thinking about how I'm going to do it, but I've got a rough plan at this point. It's I've got some big ideas, I think, about how I want it to kind of go. But the idea being that it's broken down into kind of chunks, so it's like very much on a specific topic. So like which lenses to use or which lights to use, or lots of different elements to it. So that is something that I'm going to get cracking with pretty soon.
That's exciting stuff. I've said many times to many other toy photographers, I love seeing the behind the scenes stuff, looking behind the curtains. I think it's the magic is you see what you see, what you don't see. Basically, so I appreciate the exclusive being dropped there. That's exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to doing it. It's something that I've had in mind for a while, and it's I'm someone that I have ideas, and then very often I'm like, oh, I'll come to that. Do you know what I mean? I'm not ready to do it yet, and I've been sort of umming and ahhing about it over the last year or so, and I feel like actually now I want to get it done.
Excellent. That sounds really positive stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that's a good point as any to wrap up the video. So, Sixo, thank you so much for coming along. And yeah, it's just been great to have such a well-known figure in the Transformer community who's appeared at TF Nation, appeared on streams with Hasbro, which I feel you've been too modest there with your sum up at the end. You're very recognized in the community. So your work has spoken volume for years. I really do appreciate you coming on and imparting some of your knowledge to the viewers here today.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks very much for watching, everyone. And as always, I will see you on the next one.